Hello, and welcome to Ideas with Diana on this September 13th, 2025. I was over at Barnes& and Noble. They were able to get the book, Biography of William F. Buckley, Buckley, A Man and the Revolution by Sam Tannenhaus. I started to read it. Normally when I read a book, what I do is I read selected chapters first. I read one chapter starting on page 156 about Buckley's senior year at Yale, where he gave a speech writing on the train. He made a joke about how he, like Lincoln, would compose his speeches on the train. It reminds me of some of a similar feeling because sometimes some of my most creative moments have been on the train too, but it's been an old Northwestern and now called Metra, going from Kenosha to Chicago like that though. Or even in more recent times down to Lake Forest with friends like that though, and meet me at the Starbucks. And well, when I read the chapter, I was struck by an interesting thing. He's chairman of the daily newspaper, which I'm always glad when universities have a daily newspaper, like Northwestern has a Daily Northwestern. Parkside used to have a weekly paper, UW Parkside in Kenosha, my alma mater for my undergraduate degrees. And what the thing about is when I read it is like basically he also wrote articles that sort of exposed hypocrisies and even needed criticisms, like basically someone saying stop when people are afraid to say stop. And it's sometimes basically when he was asked to give a speech, one time he was asked to give a speech, I read in the chapter book, he's called by the president of the university, so well, this is not the right occasion to read this, but maybe another place. So what happened, he offered said, well, I can try to soften the speech or withdraw from reading it. And at first the president didn't want to, but of the university wanted to, but then he accepted it, and it shows high integrity like that though. But then it goes in a chapter. An interesting point was when donors were coming, and some of the donors said, "Well, I just wonder, is this university all? This is my word, a monoculture where everyone is a liberal New Deal Democrat because they were so conservatives." And then this is a case where he contacted student people in Buckley to send editorials where he was critical, giving the conservative view. And the reason why I like this is because even at UW Parkside, I'm sort of viewed the same way like that though, because what happens when I went to Parkside in the 70s and 80s was very much a liberal, was even though it was a Wisconsin University located in Kenosha, which was merged from UW-Racine in Kenosha in 1968. It was a very world of ideas. So basically, everyone, many different people went there, conservatives, liberals, even many Vietnam veterans, because a lot of Vietnam veterans went to Parkside because after their service, Parkside was one of few UW system campuses that didn't use derogatory names or basically do fast judgments. Because like the Billy Jack movies, basically many of them were put in positions where basically they could not disagree with an unjust order because they were below a certain rank, as was demonstrated in the Billy Jack movie. So many students at Parkside knew this, and we didn't have that. We didn't have to have the administration tell us to do this. Or I thought many of us knew it just because many family members did serve in Vietnam. My cousin on the East Coast served 3 tours in Vietnam voluntarily. And that though, and he's part of the Shriver family, and but the thing is, we sort of had Parkside was supposed to be what Madison used to be, but regressed when they became overly political in '64, and especially through the '68 period and others. And it reminds me when I was reading the autobiography of Buckley, where Buckley wrote a book, God and Man in Yale. And I was thinking about that, even like with Parkside today, like when I went back, because like on the Parkside, a few years ago, I took continuing education classes, communications, and computer science, and I stopped because basically it wasn't the same Parkside. I mean, I had one professor criticize me because my manner of speech is upper class, and he felt that that I should talk down to his level, and I wasn't using it as a way to snub him or anything else, but he used every opportunity to do social class warfare against me and other people who were raised in upper middle class families. The other thing is also the political correctness, because there's an interesting thing about where basically a certain thing happened using cell phone messaging, and something was done, and federal authorities were called to investigate, but the phone company at that time wouldn't release the text because they had end-to-end encryption. And I said, well, I said in a moment, I said, well, wait a minute. I said, this is shouldn't there have been a decision taken to take this matter further, rather than just letting the CEO of a computer company be judge, jury, and an adjudicator on this? Don't we have a system of law? And mostly everyone looked at me except for a few students, because I had espoused a conservative opinion that there should be a process. It shouldn't just be basically, I have the power, I have the coins, I make the laws. And this goes back to what I liked about when I'm starting to read the book Buckley, especially a chapter like when God and Man in Yale. Buckley exposes some of the concerns he has about Yale, and about being a conservative at that time in school that's becoming very liberal. It reminds you a lot of Parkside. Parkside's becoming a liberal in the same way that Buckley described Yale was at that time too. And I sort of feel the same way. And when I read the book, the biography of Buckley, I was glad to see that basically that I'm not the lone wolf, I'm not the lone duck, I'm not the bad seed. You have a right to be conservative. And also you can be LGBT, as demonstrated on filing line with the Hoover Institution. There are many allies at Hoover Institution that support LGBTQ. Even the moderator supports LGBTQ as an ally. So, but the point is, what I like about this is, the biggest point is when I went to Barnes and Noble to get the book, though. There's in this area in Racine and that in Kenosha, there's been a little bit of a pushback of liberalism trying to quelch conservatism, for the sake of power, not for the sake of the betterment of society or ideas. And so I went to Barnes and Noble. I went out and I went to one desk. That's why we see and the one person at the desk realized what book I got. She is a little snippy, so I said, well, you have to go up front. So I went up to the person up front, and she went to the person up front. She smiled and says, boy, this is a very big and detailed book on Buckley. I said, yes. I said, I did. And I said, well, could I review it before I buy? I said, yes. And then I just started to look at the first, and I said, well, what I'd like to do, I said, I was wondering, could you hold that until I get paid again on the 3rd? She said, yes, I can. So what happened? She did. Then I went to the coffee shop and I read a few chapters. And regarding like this one chapter, which I released, like when an editor asked for Buckley to sort of send some of his editorials so that they could show conservative donors that conservatives and the students and the families could live and thrive at Yale of that time in the 1950s. I'm sort of the same way, because basically when Republicans come to Parkside, or Republican families, although sometimes I'm criticized by the administration, sometimes by some faculty, and some faculty who's afraid to speak out for the fear they'll lose their retirement if they come out and say that they agree with certain conservative ideas. I'm always asked, well, oh yeah, here's Diana. She's a Republican too. She graduated here in pre-med and everything. And then I give my 2 cents and say, well, yes, but I said, just remember, the Parkside I went to was different than the Parkside today. I said, but the thing is, I said, I said, if you are going to have your son or daughter go here, make sure you keep in contact with them, because the parks that I went to was more open-minded, and there was less of a scripted teaching and thought control. And sometimes the guys look at me and say, well, you should have said that. I said, well, you asked me to express an honest opinion, I am. And the reason why I say that is because when I went to Parkside, I was actually the basis for College for Kids because I took my first college class when I was in eighth grade in the 70s. And then after high school, I graduated and went into the pre-med program, computer science program, EE, and also with a minor, with a breadth of knowledge, which is now considered a minor in art and history. Well, at that time, what happens? Parkside was very much open. We had different types of cultures. Everyone could exist peacefully. We even had a Christian. We had different two Christian group, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and another Christian Fellowship. We had the Doctor Who Club. We had the Goth Club. We had other stuff, and the Chancellor Guskin. I remember him like that though. He was like Governor Dreyfus when he was the chancellor at UW Stevens Point. He'd walk the hall, so every so often I walk down the hallway. There's like a long stretch that connects different buildings, and he'd talk with me and he'd say, "Well, how are you doing?" and everything else, and he'd talk with us students because at Parkside the way they have it designed is this is the ground floor, then the chancellor's office is way up here. They call it the power tower, and nowadays the new chancellors all just reside in the power towers. The way to think of it think of it as basically like some uh, uh, fictional stories like that though. Where basically like the Hobbit. Think of it like the Hobbit. You have the evil prince or princess up here in this tower, and then the people they control dominate down here. And in a way, it's like that's how it is. What happens, and they wonder why student enrollment's going down. And I mean, when I saw a thing in Buckley's book about God and man in Yale, maybe I should write a book, God and Trans and Parkside. Because in the same way, because I think what he said in his book still needs to be said today, but in regard to the UW system, and that's why I'm a big follower of William F. Buckley. I watch Filing Line every Friday night on Milwaukee Channel 10.1 TV, and friends know that when Filing Line is on, do not call me, especially when it's a new show. Do not call me. You can call me afterwards, but don't call me before. Call me afterwards after 8 o'clock, and they always ask me because some of them are afraid to watch this. I said, well, what did they say on Filing Line? And they said, oh, that sounds great, but for some reason they're afraid to let people know that they watch it. It's like basically like they're gonna get a liberal curse or something if they watch it. I mean, it's God, it's so humorous like that. It's like and people who are liberal are not like that. But the problem is, in the chapters I read in Buckley's biography, he was right about, and even the thoughts of God and man in Yale still transcribed today to what has happened with this society because um, like at my alma mater. I thought I'd take two, but after basically taking two continuous education classes and then trying to take a third where I walked out, um, basically and just dropped the class. I just thought, oh, this is not. How do students learn? And the one bastion at that time when I was taking continuing education classes was we had a radio station, WIPZ, where the students could do live radio broadcasting and programs and I had my show Ideas with Diana, which originally was on WIPZ at 11 o'clock Monday mornings as a radio broadcast, and then later Ron joined the show, and then later Nikita. However, when we were on the show, some of the administration would say would label us as the Howard Stern of Parkside or Howard Stern of College Radio because sometimes when we're doing the show, the little red flash on the phone would flash from the administration office telling us to stop talking about what we're talking about. And at one point, they even want us to submit a script for approval. And I explained that we are a live show, just like William F. Buckley's show was, and we do not work from a script. We pick topics. I said, I'll send you an outline of topics we're going to discuss, but we're not going to alter those topics, and we're not going to provide. And at one point, our show was basically taken off 3 times because some administration thought that they could sort of corral us or whip us into submission. Another time, we had taken off for a month, and by the time the second blockage came off, that's when I moved the show over to radio and podcasting. So that's why you'll see a lot of videos with Ideas with Diana from the past, because basically, and even at the time we did the show, they were supposed to keep our recordings for us to use for when we went for job interviews or other things. Mysteriously, all our shows recordings from there have been lost. Yes, they have been lost. And they said something about having system difficulties in retrieving it, so they had to reset the whole system and wipe the hard drive and everything else. And it's thinking like going, pile, surprise, surprise, surprise. And if William Buckley is alive, I could just wonder what he would say about something like this. So about suddenly losing all the recordings of the show, um, miraculously, even and. But yet, when conservative parents come to campus, I'm always asked to be the representative of Parkside to talk with them to show that, just like in Buckley's book, God and Man, conservatives can live at Parkside too, or at Yale at that time. So when I read the book Buckley, I'm very enthused. I'm very it expresses a very good sentiment and very good ideas that I believe in. Also, what I do when I read a book, I read selective chapters first to get an idea as to certain things that I want to discover first about certain aspects, and then I'll go and read it all the way through. In a way, though, Sam Tannenhaus's book on Buckley is just as monumental as Douglas Hofstadter's book GEB, Ghetto, Etchler, and Bach, was for AI in the 1980s. Um, and with GEB, he actually came to Parkside to speak because in 1970 we used to have a lot of different speakers that would come. Douglas Hofstadter, the Playboy Sex Advisor. Yes, I said the Playboy Sex Advisor. That Playboy's not a dirty word. The Playboy's not a dirty organization. This was before Dr. Luth, and also we have other intellectuals come and it was completely uncensored. They weren't given talking points. They weren't giving rails on what to stay on and talk, and they weren't told what's that called? It's snowflake terminology. It's like um, temper points or boiling points or some sort of foreign steel, what you could talk about. And so what happened was he came and at that time, I went two friends. We were sophomores in computer science, and we went to Jenny and Mike, and we went there, and we all attended. And in my computer science class at that time, there were more chords in my computer science class than I observed than today at Parkside when I went to Parkside. But also, what happens? So, what a nice thing I noticed when I with the chords that were in the computer class at Parkside, I'm glad to see that they were liberated. They're breaking away, even though the university tried to keep everyone on rails and control what you speak, and that's what people felt like. They felt like that, and even at the radio station, they said, "Well, we shouldn't protest because we're afraid. Say this because we're afraid." And one person said, "You're in college. You have a right to protest. You have a right to say stuff, but you don't. As long as you don't espouse violence and you don't say violence against anyone, you have a right to discuss an idea." Because this reminds me again when I was reading Sam Tannenhaus's book. In the chapter, William F. Buckley was invited to do a radio show that Yale did. That's like Connecticut something, and another show done by the Mutual Broadcasting Company back then of a talk 15-minute talk radio program. And they had William Buckley on, and they had another guest, and the moderator asked the guest about a certain question regarding leanings, and the moderator and the person answered, says, "Well, what you asked me." He said, "You said I could sue you for slander." He said, "No." He said, "I didn't ask you directly about what you." I said, "I asked you that do you feel that if someone has those leanings that could lead to something like this?" So it's not an attack on you. And see, again, basically, this is a case where with the American conservative movement, not to be bullied by people who try to use legal abuse or try to trick you. In that, though, you have a right to speak, and you have a right to ask questions, and you have a right to ask indirect questions like that, though, too. And indirect questions is not considered slander. So that's why I'm very enthused about this book. Um, I'm going to read more when I pick it up on the third. But like Ghetto Etcher and Bach, it's going to be a very detailed reading because it's a type of reading where you just can't read it once the first time. It would help if you read it multiple times, just like I did with Ghetto Etcher and Bach. So a wonderful book, and I'm glad that basically when I went to Barnes and Noble today, there's a nice reception because at my local university at UW Parkside, um, I get a feeling that basically being a conservative, we have to sort of watch who we talk to in this area, and we have to watch on what we say. Even in my own building, I have friends who are conservatives, and they come and talk with me in my apartment, and sometimes we can't talk in the common room because if we talk about anything, they'll say, "Well, you're criticizing Obama. You're racist. You're." It's like, no. And this is a tete-a-tete conversation that you're not invited in, and we are not breaking any type of protocols. And for a while, some coffee shops, and we've seen it was they had people that like that because one time a friend and I were having a cup of coffee or talking, and that one person was eavesdropping and being a busybody. He says, "Well, you shouldn't say that about Biden. Biden's and I finally said, I said, sir, we're having a tete-a-tete. This is a private conversation. This isn't a public one. We are talking quietly. I suggest that if you wish, we can move, or you can move to another table." And he says, "Well, you shouldn't be talking about it anyway." And finally, his wife came and his wife said, "George, she's right. Either accept for them to move to another table and apologize, or we'll move." And the wife had her and her husband moved to another table, but later his wife came apart and says, "I'm sorry, says, I should have watched him closer." And see, this is the thing. It comes to demeanor, comportment, and temperament. And in this society, we need to have that because even in following William F. Buckley through National Review, the TV program, even watching Margaret Hoover's filing line, and we also read the book Buckley. Buckley had many people of different viewpoints, but Buckley was not the type that basically, if someone talked about a certain viewpoint, that he would openly physically attack the person, or authorize the person to be beaten up on the street corner or something, or just because. And see, that's the different. That's what American conservatism is about. Is people can express different viewpoints, even a viewpoint. You can express a viewpoint even if someone disagrees with you and agrees with you greatly, but they're not allowed to hurt you. They're not allowed to kill you. They're not allowed to beat you up. Like what happened this week. Many people say, well, the person who was killed, he expressed different views on different topics and different groups of people. Fine, everyone does. But did the person express that those groups of people should be killed? No. Everyone has a right to their own opinions, but their own opinions are not facts. And also, everyone has a right to their own decisions, but their own decisions are not judgments. They're not allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner either. And that's what the problem is in this society. And that's why I'm glad the book by Buckley came out, because, again, as an autobiographer mentioned, just like what happened in Yale in the 50s when Buckley felt the need to like God and man in Yale. And I've been told by some liberal teachers that you shouldn't say put God and man in Yale together. That isn't proper grammar, but yes, it is. And it's proven by William F. Buckley in his book. He wrote many articles. He wrote many books, many novels. And also he taught as well at Yale. So, but in this society, though, it's just like we need to get back to realize what the real basis of American conservatism is. American conservatism supports LGBTQ. However, they don't support the fractionalization that's done by certain members of LGBTQ. And what do I mean by that? Well, for example, years ago, there's an LGBTQ picnic in Racine, and friends and I were invited, and we were talking, we were meeting different people, and there's one person we met, and he says, and we said, and we had exchanged small talks, and at one point we made a mistake in the gender in the gender description because we made an assumption based on the way the person was dressed and demeanor and conforming. We assumed that their gender presentation was a certain way. And I can understand when people get the gender designation misgendered. Yes, it can get it can sort of make someone feel some way. I've had that happen sometimes too, even though as sometimes my male tape voice comes out and they think of me as Commander Kaneki, like that, so as a male tape guy, but not, but actually no, I'm fully transitioned. So with this one person, rather than just saying, well, my preferred gender designation is this person said, well, you misgendered me. I'm an it, a they. You should have known that. And we said, well, we're sorry. We didn't realize. Well, you should have asked. And it's like, we're at a casual picnic for LGBT. There's no reason to go full funnel and full vertical. Again, this is what William Buckley would sort of exposed in God and Man in Yale about where society becomes so harsh on one side and that and even in Sam Tannenhaus mentioned in the book as well about being, and that's why part of American conservatism is to accept different ideas from all over the spectrum and in different spaces too. And it's not that basically you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but what happens, you do have to respect a person's constitutional rights and human rights as well as civil rights. But when basically the civil rights and constitutional rights, human rights, as well as voting rights are blurred or deliberately blurred, then someone has like that Santana one mentioned in his book about Buckley. Someone has to stand out and say stop when other people are afraid to say stop, and that's what was the courage of Buckley. And the thing is, American conservatism, as I see it, is not necessarily a political belief. It's not a religious belief. It's a belief of thought in life. How do you wish to live your life? Do you wish to live your life where anytime you talk with someone, you have to read a script and you have to make sure you don't deviate from the script, or you can only read certain books, and you can't read books that are defined as invalid media like that. Like, I mean, I've had some professors say, well, if you read Wikipedia, that's invalid media. If you listen to Fox News, that's invalid media. If you listen to France 24 or something, that's invalid media. Well, my parents, when they were alive, one common hobby that they shared is when they were in college, they did a reading challenge. They read all the banned books, the top 100 books on the banned book list of that time. Both of them did as a reading challenge, and that they encouraged my sister and me to do that as well. So American conservatism, as like William Buckley, is it's not that you're going to like what someone says all the time. Sometimes you're going to hate them. You're going to say, God, that's horrible. How could you think that way? No? But I rather hear what a person really thinks, but also I like to hear thinking in a non-violent way. Just because, you may not understand me, you may not understand some things I believe, and I may not understand there's no need to get violent. There's no need for someone to go and kill someone or other people. I mean, this has to stop. We're supposed to be a country of free thinkers. We're supposed to have a constitution. We're supposed to support civil rights. We're supposed to support human rights, the Helsinki Human Rights Accord, which means you have a right to your own identity. And your own identity means you have a right to your own thought, but also you have a right to your own evaluations. But again, just like someone's own opinion are not facts, someone's own evaluation is not a judgment. They're not allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner. And we have to get that message across. No one's allowed to be judged during execution, or in someone's evaluation of a judgment or something. They're not allowed to be judged during executioner, because um, and that's why I'm glad with William and Buckley's book coming out, we have American conservatism sort of making a rebound and coming back, because um, the problem is both parties have blurred the definition. That's why if people wonder, why did Trump get elected? Trump wasn't elected because he was liked by the Republican Party, and the Democrats didn't come out. The reason why Trump was elected is one simple fact. We are moving to a three-party system, and I think it's time for a permanent three-party system. And what the permanent three-party system was during the election is called MAGA, but actually MAGA was not. It's not necessarily the people wearing the red hats saying "Make America Great Again." It was people who were frustrated at both parties, and they knew that basically if they tried to work inside both parties to try to correct the errors, it wouldn't work. So for a second time, they had to form a union with people who wore the red hats, "Make America Great Again," even though they didn't agree with their thoughts and opinions equally, but they did share an agreement that both parties are in error, and that they needed a candidate that was hated by both parties to get in office to help try to bring the country back together again. And that candidate was Trump. So in a way, it's like the series Maude. Trump is like Maude, and or it's like if I like Trump is Nixon's Revenge, but also as one person told me, who's a conservative Christian, she considered President Trump really the Prince of Peace, because he is trying to bring peace and keep us out of forever wars, which I give the president great effort in doing this. I know it's very hard to do this, and especially from what I observed from different news sources. So this is the reason why I'm glad William F. Buckley's biography is being greatly accepted, and I would recommend everyone to get it. It's about $40 at Barnes & Noble. If you have a discount card, it's $20 off, so it's $32. It's about 1,000-page hardcover, very good reading, and very challenging, but also very easy reading. So you don't have to be a scholar to understand this. This isn't meant for a doctoral or doctoral form. This is like many things of Americans consider, so everybody can understand. Just like the way the New Republic was designed, basically with a special trim around it to indicate that it's not a droll magazine. It actually has movie reviews and other things, and even the book it mentioned that some of the early articles were written by writers who worked with the Marx Brothers, so of comedic fame in early American film. So what happens though is what I'm saying is, I love the book. I'm gonna add it as part of my library. But as a final note, we need to get back to American conservatism. We need to form a third party, because basically the two-party isn't working, and what happens, it seems like the only way you get change is you have to have three parties, because basically two parties should have been able to change errors, but they didn't in this last election. So that's why people who are frustrated with both parties joined the MAGA movement to elect Trump. But American conservatism is needed, and also people need to be able to speak without fear of being shot, bullied, or killed or something like that. Though we need to get back to a certain type of demeanor, comportment, and temperament. So everyone has a right to say their opinions, but they don't have a right to hurt you, and they don't have a right to abuse you. But even if someone does hurt you, you don't have the right to do bodily harm to them either. You have a right to self-defense, but that right to self-defense is a limited right, and it also what happens though, it's only to stop from being hurt. It's not to completely prevent the person from ever doing anything ever again. So to people who said, like on Facebook, when this person Kirk was killed for shooting. Says, well, and especially liberals who said, "Oh, I'm glad he's shot." Shame on you. Shame on you. You should never be happy when someone is shot dead. Never, never, never. And as I said in the past, if any group believes in solving a solution by doing violence or doing like what was done this week, you won't have my support. No, I'm out. I'm out. So, liberals who said that, please rethink of what you said and really do some meditation, because no one, everyone has a right to opinion. Everyone has a right to say something. They don't have a right to die. That's where we need to get back to the true basis of American conservatism, where we can speak and we can speak peacefully. We may disagree, we may argue, fine, but that's how things get solved. Problem solving is not neat and tight. It's not scripted. Problem solving is messy. It's like working on a project with glue. Your hands sometimes get glue on your hands, but you still get something built. And so this has been Ideas with Diana. I'd like to thank you for watching, and please feel free to follow me on YouTube, X, Facebook, and Blue Sky. And thanks again for watching.